The morning of Tyler's 16th birthday started like any other Saturday in our suburban Denver home. I was up at 6 a.m., despite it being the weekend, meticulously arranging the decorations I'd been planning for weeks. Blue and silver streamers hung from every doorway, matching the Colorado Rockies theme Tyler had loved since he was 8. The kitchen counter was covered with homemade chocolate chip cookies shaped like baseball gloves, and I'd spent 3 hours the night before perfecting the fondant logo on his cake. My husband David shuffled into the kitchen around 8, already dressed in his weekend uniform of worn jeans and a faded Denver Broncos t-shirt. He paused, taking in the transformation of our normally modest kitchen into what looked like a professional party venue. "Jesus, Sarah, did you sleep at all?" he asked, pouring himself coffee from the pot I'd made an hour earlier. "I wanted everything to be perfect," I replied, adjusting a balloon that had slightly deflated overnight. "It's his sweet 16. This is important." David's expression was unreadable as he watched me fuss over the placement of plastic forks. "Honey, you know Tyler's been different lately. Maybe tone it down a bit." Different. That was David's diplomatic way of describing how our once affectionate son had become increasingly distant over the past year. Where Tyler used to run to me after school, eager to share every detail of his day, now he barely grunted hello before disappearing into his room. I told myself it was normal teenage behavior, but deep down, it felt like losing a piece of my heart every day. "He's still my little boy," I said, smoothing down the tablecloth for the 3rd time. And little boys deserve to feel special on their birthday. By 10 a.m., I had set up a photo booth corner with props I'd ordered online, arranged his gifts in perfect height order, and even created a playlist of songs from every year of his life. The doorbell rang and my heart leaped. Tyler's friends were arriving early. Maybe he was excited after all. But when I opened the door, it was just the grocery delivery with the ice cream I'd forgotten to pick up yesterday. As I signed for the delivery, I heard Tyler's bedroom door open upstairs, followed by heavy footsteps on our hardwood stairs. "Morning, birthday boy." I called out, my voice hitting that overly cheerful octave that had become my default when talking to him lately. Tyler appeared in the kitchen doorway, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles, wearing the same gray hoodie he'd practically lived in for the past month. He stopped short when he saw the decorations, and I watched his face go through a series of expressions: surprise, embarrassment, and finally, that familiar look of teenage exasperation that had become all too common. "Mom, what is all this?" he asked, gesturing broadly at my carefully crafted birthday wonderland. "It's your party, sweetheart. I know you said you didn't want anything big, but I couldn't let your 16th birthday pass without celebrating properly." I moved toward him, reaching to smooth down his unruly hair like I'd done 1,000 times before. He stepped back just out of reach. "I told you I didn't want a party. I just wanted to hang out with Jake and maybe play some video games. But honey, this is a milestone birthday. Look, I made your favorite cookies, and wait until you see the cake." I spent hours on the Rockies logo and... "Mom, stop." Tyler's voice carried a sharpness that made me freeze mid-sentence. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You never listen. I said I didn't want this." David cleared his throat from where he'd been quietly observing near the coffee maker. "Tyler, your mother worked really hard on this. Maybe we can compromise." "There's nothing to compromise about." Tyler's voice cracked slightly, the way it still did when he got emotional, reminding me that despite his attempts to seem grown up, he was still just a kid. "She does this with everything. She shows up to my school events when I don't want her there. She packs my lunch like I'm in elementary school, and now this. I can't breathe without her hovering over me." Each word felt like a physical blow. I'd packed his lunch because I wanted to make sure he ate well. I attended his school events because I was proud of him. Everything I did came from love, but somehow in Tyler's eyes, it had become suffocating. "I just want to take care of you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't need you to take care of me like this anymore." Tyler's frustration boiled over. "I'm 16, Mom. I can pack my own lunch. I can handle my own problems. You treat me like I'm helpless and it's embarrassing. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my heart breaking. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Patterson next door starting her lawnmower, the normal sounds of a Saturday morning continuing while my world felt like it was crumbling. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I managed to say. "I was just trying to make your birthday special." Tyler ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he'd inherited from David. For a moment, his expression softened, and I caught a glimpse of the sweet boy who used to curl up in my lap during thunderstorms. "Mom, I know you mean well," but he paused, struggling to find the right words. You're too much, Mom. This is all too much." The words hit me like a physical punch. Too much. The phrase echoed in my head as I stared at the decorations I'd spent hours putting up, the cookies I'd shaped with such care, the cake that represented hours of love and effort. All of it suddenly looked garish and overwhelming through Tyler's eyes. I felt David's hand on my shoulder, but I shrugged it off. Tyler was already heading toward the stairs, clearly done with the conversation. "Where are you going?" I called after him. "To Jake's house, where I can just be a normal teenager without feeling like I'm disappointing someone just by existing." The front door slammed 30 seconds later, leaving David and me standing in our decorated kitchen like survivors of some colorful explosion. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the things we couldn't say. "Sarah, he didn't mean," David started. "Yes, he did." I walked over to the beautiful cake I had spent so much time on, looking at the perfect fondant logo that Tyler would never see. He meant every word. I thought about all the times over the past year when Tyler had seemed uncomfortable with my attention. The way he'd asked me to drop him off a block away from school. How he'd stopped telling me about his problems. The look of embarrassment on his face when I'd showed up to his baseball game with a homemade banner. I'd attributed it all to normal teenage development, but maybe it was more than that. Maybe I had become too much. Without saying another word to David, I walked to the hall closet and pulled out my suitcase, the one I used for business trips and the occasional weekend getaway with my sister. "What are you doing?" David asked, following me upstairs to our bedroom. "I'm giving Tyler what he wants," I said, throwing clothes into the suitcase without really looking at what I was packing. Space, distance, a break from his too much mother. "Sarah, don't be dramatic. He's 16. They all say things they don't mean." I stopped packing and looked at my husband. David was a good man, steady and reliable, but he'd never understood the intensity of my relationship with Tyler. David loved our son deeply, but his love was quiet, undemanding. Mine had apparently become a burden. What if he did mean it? I asked, what if I really have been too much? What if my love has been smothering him instead of nurturing him? David sat on the edge of our bed, watching me fold and refold the same shirt 3 times. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. Maybe to Rebecca's cabin in Aspen. Maybe I'll just drive until I figure it out." I zipped up the suitcase with more force than necessary. "I need to think, David. I need to figure out how I became the kind of mother my son can't stand to be around." "He doesn't. He does." I picked up my purse and car keys from the dresser, and maybe some time apart will help us both figure out how to fix this. I walked back downstairs, past the decorations that now felt like evidence of my failure as a mother. In the kitchen, I wrote a quick note and left it next to the untouched birthday cake. "Gone to think. Don't wait up. Take care of each other." As I backed out of our driveway, I saw Mrs. Patterson wave from her front yard. I didn't wave back. I couldn't pretend everything was normal when everything had just changed. The last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was our house, still decorated for a party that would never happen, and David standing in the doorway looking lost and confused. I had no idea where I was going, but for the first time in 16 years, I was going somewhere without considering what Tyler needed from me. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. I drove west on 70 for 3 hours before I realized I was crying. The tears had been falling silently, blurring the stunning Rocky Mountain landscape that normally filled me with peace. I pulled off at a rest stop near Georgetown, Colorado, and sat in my car watching families unload picnic supplies and chase toddlers around the parking lot. A young mother was struggling with a diaper bag, a cooler, and a screaming 2-year-old while her husband loaded their minivan. Without thinking, I got out of my car and approached them. "Can I help?" I offered, reaching for the diaper bag. The woman looked up, grateful and exhausted. "Thank you so much. I swear I used to be organized before I had kids." As I helped her settle the toddler into his car seat, he stopped crying and reached for my necklace, a simple silver chain Tyler had given me for Mother's Day when he was 10. His tiny fingers wrapped around it and he smiled. "He likes you," the mother said. "I'm Jessica, by the way." "Sarah," I replied, gently extracting my necklace from the toddler's grip. "He's beautiful." "Most of the time," Jessica laughed. "Though I'm pretty sure I'm screwing him up already. This morning I let him eat cookies for breakfast because I was too tired to fight about it. Mother of the Year, right?" I found myself smiling for the first time all day. "Trust me, you're doing better than you think." As they drove away, Jessica waved from the passenger window, and I felt a strange pang in my chest. When was the last time Tyler had waved goodbye to me? When was the last time he'd seemed happy to see me at all? I got back in my car, but couldn't bring myself to continue driving. Instead, I called my sister Rebecca from the parking lot. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Rebecca answered on the second ring, immediately picking up on something in my voice. "Can I use your cabin for a few days? I need to get away." "Of course, but what happened? Is everything okay with David? Tyler?" I told her about the birthday disaster, about Tyler's words, about walking away from the life I'd built around being his mother. Rebecca listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I'd always loved about my younger sister. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished. "I'm so sorry. But you know what? Maybe this is exactly what you both need." "What do you mean?" "When's the last time you did something just for yourself? Not for Tyler, not for David, just for Sarah." I sat in silence, genuinely trying to remember. "I don't know. Exactly. The cabin is yours for as long as you need it. The key is under the blue flower pot on the porch, same as always. And Sarah, Tyler loves you. Sometimes teenage boys are just terrible at showing it." After we hung up, I drove the remaining hour to Rebecca's cabin in Aspen. It was a small, rustic place she'd inherited from our grandmother, tucked away in the mountains with no neighbors for miles. The perfect place to disappear and think. The cabin was exactly as I remembered: one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room dominated by a stone fireplace. But what struck me most was the silence. No video games, no teenage footsteps overhead, no constant mental checklist of what Tyler needed, what Tyler wanted, what Tyler might be feeling. Just silence. I unpacked my hastily thrown-together suitcase and realized I'd brought 3 of David's t-shirts and only 1 pair of my own pants. Even in my moment of rebellion, I'd been thinking about taking care of someone else. That night, I sat on the cabin's small porch with a cup of tea, listening to the wind in the pine trees and the distant sound of a creek running somewhere in the darkness. I tried to remember the last time I'd sat still like this, with no agenda, no one to take care of, no schedule to maintain. I couldn't. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Tyler came home around 9. Asked where you were. I told him you needed some space. He went to his room without saying anything. Are you okay? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I'm safe. Need to think. Kiss Tyler goodnight for me. David's response came immediately. He said he wanted to do it himself tonight. I set the phone aside and let myself cry properly for the first time all day. Big, ugly sobs that echoed in the mountain air. I cried for the little boy who used to think I was the most wonderful person in the world. I cried for the mother I'd been trying so hard to be that I'd lost sight of who I actually was. And I cried for the distance that had grown between us so gradually that I hadn't noticed until it became a chasm. The next morning, I woke up at 10 a.m. for the first time in years. No alarm clock, no rushing to make breakfast, no checking to see if Tyler had remembered his homework. Just the natural rhythm of sleep and wakefulness. I made coffee and sat at the cabin's small kitchen table, looking out at the mountains. On impulse, I pulled out a notebook Rebecca kept for grocery lists and started writing. Things I used to love before I became Tyler's mom. The list started slowly. Reading mystery novels, hiking, painting watercolors. I'd been pretty good at it in college. Cooking elaborate meals just for the fun of it, not because someone needed to be fed. Dancing in the living room to music David thought was too loud. As I wrote, memories came flooding back. The woman I'd been at 25, full of dreams and ambitions that had nothing to do with anyone else's needs. I'd wanted to travel, to take art classes, to maybe open my own small business someday. I'd been confident, independent, happy with my own company. Somewhere along the way, that woman had disappeared, replaced entirely by Tyler's mom. And while I didn't regret a single moment of loving my son, I was starting to understand what Tyler meant when he said I was too much. I wasn't too much as a person. I was too much as a mother because being a mother had become all I was. That afternoon, I drove into Aspen and wandered through the art galleries I'd always wanted to visit but never had time for. I bought a small watercolor set and some canvases, feeling slightly ridiculous but also excited in a way I hadn't felt in years. Back at the cabin, I set up the art supplies on the kitchen table and tried to remember how to hold a brush. My first attempts were terrible shaky trees that looked more like green clouds, a sky that came out muddy instead of blue. But something about the act of creating something that had nothing to do with anyone else's needs felt revolutionary. My phone rang around dinner time. Tyler's name appeared on the screen, and my heart nearly stopped. I answered on the fourth ring. Mom. His voice sounded smaller than it had that morning, younger. Hi, sweetheart. Where are you? I'm at Aunt Rebecca's cabin. I'm okay. There was a long pause. Dad said you needed space. Is that because of what I said? I closed my eyes, choosing my words carefully. I needed to think about some things, Tyler, about how to be a better mom to you. You don't need to be a better mom, he said quietly. You're already, you do too much, but that doesn't mean you're not good at it. What do you mean? Another pause. Jake's mom forgot his birthday last year. Completely forgot. And Kevin's mom is never home because she works all the time. I know you care. Maybe sometimes I just wish you cared a little less loudly. I found myself smiling through tears. Less loudly. I think I can work on that. Are you coming home soon? In a few days. I want to finish thinking through some things first. Okay, Mom. Yeah. I saved you a piece of the birthday cake. Dad cut it after you left, and it was really good. The Rockies logo was perfect. After we hung up, I sat on the porch again as the sun set behind mountains. For the first time since I'd left Denver, I felt hopeful. Tyler and I weren't broken. We just needed to find a new way to love each other, one that gave us both room to breathe. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for the community college back home. Tomorrow, I decided I would call about their art classes. Not because Tyler needed me to. Not because David wanted me to, but because Sarah wanted to paint again. Back in Denver, David stood in the kitchen Tuesday morning, staring at the birthday decorations I'd left behind. Tyler had come downstairs for breakfast and stopped short when he saw the streamers still hanging from the doorway. Why didn't you take these down? Tyler asked, grabbing an apple from the counter instead of sitting down for the pancakes David had attempted to make. I don't know, David admitted. Felt wrong somehow, taking down something your mom worked so hard on. Tyler bit into his apple and considered this. They look kind of sad now. David nodded. The decorations that had seemed overwhelming on Saturday morning now looked forlorn and forgotten, like the remnants of a party that never happened. Which, he supposed, was exactly what they were. "I can help you take them down after school," Tyler offered, and David was surprised by the gesture. That would be good. They worked in the companionable silence that had become their default since I'd left. Tyler gathered the streamers while David packed away the untouched party supplies. When they got to the cake, still sitting in the refrigerator with one slice missing, Tyler paused. "Should we throw it out?" David looked at the Fondant Rockies logo I'd spent hours perfecting. "Your mom would want us to eat it. She hates wasting food." So they sat at the kitchen table and ate birthday cake for dinner, something that would have horrified me but felt right to both of them. Tyler took small bites, making the slice last as long as possible. "Dad, did I mess up really bad?" Tyler asked finally. David set down his fork. "What do you mean?" "With Mom. What I said, I didn't mean for her to leave." "I know you didn't, kiddo. It's just she was everywhere all the time. At school, at home, even when I was trying to hang out with my friends. Jake's always making jokes about how my mom shows up to stuff his mom doesn't even know about." Tyler poked at his cake with his fork, but I didn't want her to go away completely. David chose his words carefully. "Your mom loves you a lot. Sometimes when people love someone that much, they forget that the other person needs space to grow. Is she coming back?" "Yes," David said, more confidently than he felt. "She's coming back, but things might be different when she does." "Different how?" "I think your mom is figuring out how to be Tyler's mom without forgetting how to be Sarah." Tyler considered this. "Who's Sarah?" The question hit David harder than he'd expected. When was the last time he'd thought of his wife as Sarah instead of Tyler's mom? When was the last time they'd had a conversation that wasn't about Tyler's schedule, Tyler's needs, Tyler's future? "Sarah is the woman I fell in love with," David said. "She used to paint these amazing watercolor landscapes. She could make anyone laugh, even when they were having the worst day. She was brave and independent and had all these dreams about places she wanted to travel and things she wanted to learn." "What happened to her?" "She became your mom. And that's not a bad thing, Tyler. Being your mom is one of the things she's most proud of. But maybe she forgot that she could be both Sarah and your mom at the same time." That night, Tyler called his friend Jake to cancel their plans for the weekend. "Why?" Jake asked. "Your mom's not even there to embarrass you." "That's exactly why," Tyler said, though he couldn't fully explain what he meant. Instead, Tyler spent Saturday morning cleaning his room without being asked. He did his own laundry, made his own lunch, and even started on a history project that wasn't due for another week. When David asked what had gotten into him, Tyler shrugged. "Mom always does this stuff. Maybe I should learn how." David watched his son navigate the washing machine settings with the same determined concentration Tyler usually reserved for video games. It was the first time David had seen Tyler attempt to take care of himself rather than expecting to be taken care of. On Sunday, Tyler asked David to drive him to the grocery store. He walked the aisles with a list he'd written himself, selecting ingredients for spaghetti and meatballs, my favorite meal. "I want to cook dinner for Mom when she comes home," Tyler explained. "I looked up the recipe online." David watched Tyler compare pasta boxes and carefully select the right ground beef, and he felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. Their son was growing up, becoming more independent, but it had taken me leaving for any of them to notice. That evening, as Tyler practiced making meatballs under David's supervision, he asked, "Do you think Mom knows I love her?" "I think she's always known that. But I also think she lost track of how to show you she loves you without making you feel suffocated." Tyler nodded, rolling another meatball between his palms. "I want to tell her that I liked the birthday cake and the cookies shaped like baseball gloves. I just I didn't like feeling like I had to perform being happy about it, you know? David did know. He'd watched Tyler over the past year, seen him struggle between genuine appreciation for my efforts and teenage embarrassment at the intensity of my attention. Tyler loved me, but he'd been drowning in that love, unable to figure out how to ask for air without hurting my feelings. "She'll understand," David said. "Your mom is pretty smart about feelings, even when she's too close to them to see clearly." Meanwhile, at the cabin, I was discovering things about myself I'd forgotten existed. On Wednesday, I hiked 5 miles through the mountains, something I hadn't done since before Tyler was born. My legs ached, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. I'd been painting every morning, and while my skills were rusty, I was improving. More importantly, I was enjoying the process of creating something just for the joy of creating it. No one needed these paintings. No one was going to grade them or hang them on the refrigerator or use them to measure my worth as a person. They were just mine. Thursday evening, I called the community college and enrolled in 2 classes, a watercolor workshop that met on Saturday mornings and a small business development course that met Tuesday evenings. When the registrar asked for my emergency contact information, I almost automatically gave Tyler's information before catching myself and listing David instead. Small steps, but they felt significant. Rebecca called Friday morning to check on me. "You sound different," she observed. "Better. I feel different. I feel like I'm remembering who I am when I'm not in crisis mode." Crisis mode. I laughed. That's what being Tyler's mom has felt like for the past few years. Like everything was an emergency that required my immediate, total attention. His homework, his social life, his mood on any given day. I was managing his life like it was a full-time job. And now I'm realizing that maybe the best thing I can do for Tyler is show him how to be a whole person. How to have interests and goals that exist independently of other people. How to take care of yourself while still caring about others. "When are you going home?" I looked out at the mountains, at the painting I'd been working on that morning, at the peaceful life I'd carved out for myself in just a few days. Part of me wanted to stay forever, to live in this simple space where I was responsible only for myself. But I missed my family. I missed Tyler's laugh, David's steady presence, even the chaos of our everyday life. I missed being needed, just not in the overwhelming way I'd been needed before. "Tomorrow," I said, "I'm ready to go home." That night, I packed my suitcase more carefully than I'd unpacked it. The watercolor supplies went in first, along with the small painting I'd finished of the view from the cabin's porch. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine and I was proud of it. I'd been gone for 6 days. In that time, I'd remembered how to be alone without being lonely, how to enjoy my own company, how to make decisions based on what I wanted rather than what someone else needed. But more than anything, I'd remembered that loving someone doesn't mean disappearing into that love. The best mothers I knew, Rebecca, my own mother, even Jessica at the rest stop, were whole people first, mothers second. They had interests, opinions, dreams that existed alongside their love for their children, not instead of it. I was ready to go home and figure out how to be both Sarah and Tyler's mom. Not one or the other, but both in balance. As I drove away from the cabin Saturday morning, I felt nervous and excited and hopeful all at once. I had no idea what kind of reception I'd get at home, but I knew I was returning as a different person than the one who had left. The question was, were Tyler and David ready for that difference? I pulled into our driveway at 2 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, my heart racing as I saw David's car in the garage and Tyler's bike propped against the side of the house. The birthday decorations were gone from the windows, I noticed, but someone had planted new flowers in the front garden, something David must have done, since gardening had always been more my territory. Before I could even turn off the engine, the front door opened and Tyler appeared on the porch. He was wearing a clean shirt and jeans instead of his usual weekend uniform of pajama pants and hoodies, and his hair was actually combed. He stood there for a moment, as if unsure whether to approach the car or wait for me to come to him. I made the decision for both of us, getting out and walking toward the house with my suitcase. Tyler met me halfway across the front yard. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart." We stood there for an awkward moment, both of us clearly wanting to hug but uncertain about boundaries after everything that had happened. Finally, Tyler stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me in a quick, tight embrace. "I missed you," he said into my shoulder, and my eyes filled with tears. "I missed you too." David appeared in the doorway, watching us with a careful expression. "Welcome home, Sarah." "Thanks." I picked up my suitcase, and Tyler immediately reached for it. "I can carry that, Mom." It was such a small gesture, but it felt significant somehow. The old me would have insisted I could handle it myself while simultaneously appreciating his thoughtfulness. The new me simply said, "Thank you, that's very helpful." Inside, the house looked different somehow, though I couldn't immediately put my finger on what had changed. It was cleaner than usual, I realized, but in a lived-in way rather than the frantic, deep cleaning I typically did when stressed. David and Tyler had clearly been taking care of things, but they'd done it their way, not mine. "We made dinner," Tyler announced, leading me toward the kitchen. "Well, I made it." Dad supervised and prevented actual fires. On the stove sat a pot of spaghetti and meatballs that smelled absolutely delicious. The table was set with our good dishes, the ones I usually reserved for holidays, and there was even a small bouquet of flowers from our garden in the center. "Tyler wanted to do something special for your homecoming," David explained. "He's been planning this since Wednesday." I looked at my son, this 16-year-old who'd been pushing for independence, who'd told me I was too much, who'd just spent the week learning to take care of himself and his father. "You cooked for me?" Tyler nodded, suddenly looking younger and more uncertain. "I know it's not as fancy as the stuff you make, but I followed the recipe exactly. I even made the meatballs from scratch like you do." I felt that familiar surge of maternal pride, but this time it was tempered with something else, respect for Tyler as his own person, making his own choices about how to show love. "I can't wait to try it," I said. "But first, I want to show you both something." I opened my suitcase and pulled out the small painting I'd finished at the cabin. It showed the view from Rebecca's porch pine trees against mountains, with a sky that I'd actually managed to get right after several attempts. "You painted this?" Tyler asked, taking it carefully in his hands. "I used to paint before you were born. I decided it was time to try it again." David leaned over to look at the painting. "Sarah, this is beautiful. I'd forgotten how talented you are." I'd forgotten too. I sat down at the kitchen table, feeling strangely nervous. I enrolled in some classes back home, art classes and a business course. I'll be out some evenings and Saturday mornings. Tyler and David exchanged a look I couldn't read. "Is that okay with you guys?" I asked. "Mom," Tyler said, setting down the painting carefully, "you don't need our permission to have a life." The simple statement hit me with unexpected force. He was right, of course. I didn't need their permission, but I'd been asking for it anyway, making my choices contingent on their approval, their needs, their schedules. "You're right," I said. "I don't. But I want you to know that me having interests outside this family doesn't mean I love you any less." "I know that," Tyler said. "Actually, it's kind of cool. Jake's going to be so jealous when I tell him my mom is an artist." David reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm proud of you, Sarah, for taking time for yourself, for figuring out what you needed." "I'm not done figuring it out," I admitted, "but I learned some important things this week. About boundaries, about identity, about how to love people without losing myself in that love." Tyler served the spaghetti and meatballs, and I was genuinely impressed by both the presentation and the taste. As we ate, we talked about the week we'd spent apart. Tyler told me about doing his own laundry. The clothes came out pink, but Dad fixed it. And David shared how they'd managed household responsibilities between them. It made me realize how much you do that we just take for granted, David said. Tyler and I had to actually coordinate to make sure everything got done. And it made me realize that I actually can do a lot of this stuff myself, Tyler added. I just never tried because you always did it first. I nodded, understanding. I think I was afraid that if I didn't do everything for you, you wouldn't need me anymore. Mom, I'm always going to need you, Tyler said. Just maybe not to pack my lunch every day. We all laughed, and for the first time in months, it felt completely natural and unforced. After dinner, Tyler excused himself to call Jake and David, and I cleaned up the kitchen together. It felt different from our usual post-dinner routine, more collaborative, less like I was managing everything while he helped. How are you feeling about being back? David asked as we loaded the dishwasher. Good. Nervous, but good. I don't want to slip back into old patterns. What can I do to help with that? I paused, considering. Maybe we could have a weekly check-in? Talk about how things are going, whether we're falling back into habits that don't work for any of us. I'd like that, David said. And Sarah, I want you to know that I fell in love with you, not just Tyler's mom. I'm excited to get to know Sarah again. That evening, I unpacked my suitcase properly, hanging up clothes and setting up my new art supplies in the corner of our bedroom that had previously been occupied by a pile of Tyler's outgrown clothes I'd been meaning to donate. It felt symbolic somehow, clearing out the old to make room for something new. Tyler knocked on the bedroom door around 9 p.m. Mom, can we talk? Of course. I patted the bed beside me, and he sat down, fidgeting with the edge of his pillowcase. I want to apologize for what I said on my birthday, about you being too much. Tyler, you don't need to. Yes, I do. The way I said it was mean, and I hurt your feelings. But he paused, struggling with how to express something complex. I wasn't wrong about needing more space. I just said it in the worst possible way. I reached over and smoothed down a piece of his hair that was sticking up, an old gesture that felt natural rather than intrusive this time. You know what I learned this week? You were right. Not about me being too much as a person, but about me being too involved in your life. I was trying so hard to be the perfect mother that I forgot you need room to become your own person. I don't want you to stop caring, Tyler said quickly. I just want to feel like I can make mistakes without disappointing you, or accomplish things without it being about how well you raised me. That makes complete sense, I said. And Tyler, you don't have to manage my feelings anymore. If you need space, you can ask for it without worrying about whether it will hurt me. I'm strong enough to handle your honesty. Tyler leaned against my shoulder, not quite the little boy snuggle of years past, but not the complete avoidance of recent months either. I saved the Rockies logo from the cake. It's in the freezer. I thought maybe we could frame it or something. I laughed, genuinely delighted. We could do that, though it might be the first time anyone's ever framed a piece of cake. There's a first time for everything, Tyler said, echoing something I'd told him countless times over the years. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm that felt both familiar and different. I still made Tyler's breakfast, but I didn't pack his lunch unless he asked me to. I still attended his baseball games, but I sat in the regular bleachers instead of bringing homemade banners and organizing snacks for the whole team. Most importantly, I started living my own life alongside my role as Tyler's mother. My Saturday morning art class became a cherished part of my week. I discovered I had a natural talent for landscape painting, and my teacher encouraged me to consider selling some pieces at the local farmers market. The idea terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. The business development course was eye-opening in a different way. I found myself sketching out plans for a small art studio, maybe offering classes for other parents who'd lost touch with their creative sides. It was just a dream at this point, but it was my dream, separate from anyone else's needs or expectations. Tyler's behavior changed too, in ways I hadn't expected. Without the pressure of constant maternal attention, he became more willing to share things voluntarily. He'd tell me about his day at school while helping with dinner, or show me funny videos his friends had shared while we watched TV together. The relationship felt more genuine, less performative on both sides. One evening in November, about 2 months after my return, Tyler came home from school with a permission slip for the senior class college tour. In the past, I would have immediately started researching every college on the itinerary, making lists of questions he should ask, and probably volunteering to chaperone. Instead, I signed the form and handed it back to him. "That's it." Tyler asked, looking surprised. "What do you mean?" "Aren't you going to ask me about my college preferences and start researching admission requirements and make me practice interview questions?" I smiled. "Do you want me to do those things?" Tyler considered this seriously. "Maybe we could research colleges together sometimes? Like when I ask you to." "I would love that." "And Mom, when I do start applying to colleges next year, I might need help with some of the paperwork and stuff. But I want to write my own essays and make my own choices about where to apply." "That sounds perfect." That night, as David and I got ready for bed, he commented on how much more relaxed our household had become. "It's like we're all breathing easier," he said. "Tyler seems happier, and you seem more like yourself." "I feel more like myself," I agreed. "It's amazing how much energy I have when I'm not spending it all trying to anticipate everyone else's needs." "Any regrets about the way things changed?" I thought about this seriously. I regret that it took Tyler basically rejecting me for us to figure this out. I wish I'd learned how to balance being his mother with being myself before it reached a crisis point. But no, I don't regret the changes themselves. 6 months later, I sold my first painting at the farmer's market, a watercolor of the mountains from Rebecca's cabin. The buyer was a young mother who told me she'd started painting again after her kids went to school. "It's amazing how much of yourself you can lose in motherhood without even realizing it," she said as she handed me the money. "And how much of yourself you can find again when you're ready," I replied. That evening, Tyler helped me frame the check for my first sale, not because I asked him to, but because he wanted to celebrate my accomplishment. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said as we hung the frame in my little art corner. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything to me." "You know what's funny?" Tyler asked. "I used to be embarrassed when you showed up to my stuff because you were so intense about it. But now Jake's mom asked if you could teach her to paint, and Kevin thinks it's cool that my mom is an artist. You're still my mom, but you're also your own person, and that's actually pretty awesome." As I tucked him in that night, a ritual he still occasionally allowed, though he'd never admit it to his friends, Tyler asked, "Do you think we're going to be okay? Our family, I mean." "I think we're going to be better than okay," I said. "I think we're going to be real with each other in a way we've never been before." "Good," Tyler said, settling into his pillow. "I like this version of us better." I turned off his light and headed to my art corner, where a half-finished painting of our neighborhood waited on the easel. It wasn't perfect, the proportions were a little off, and I was still working on getting the shadows right. But it was mine, created from my own vision and effort, a piece of myself that existed independently of anyone else's needs. I picked up my brush and added a few more strokes to the sky, thinking about how healthy love gives people room to grow. How the best gift I could give Tyler wasn't my constant attention, but my example of how to be a whole, independent person who chooses to love others rather than disappearing into that love. Outside, I could hear David watching the late news and the distant sound of Tyler's music playing softly through his bedroom door. Normal sounds of a family learning how to love each other better. I smiled and kept painting, adding depth and dimension to the world I was creating with my own hands, in my own time, for my own joy. It felt like coming home to myself. 1 year later, Tyler's 17th birthday was different from his 16th in every possible way. Instead of elaborate decorations and a surprise party, I asked him what he actually wanted. Maybe just dinner with a few friends? And could you make that chocolate cake you've been practicing in your baking class? So that's what we did. 5 of Tyler's friends came over for pizza and homemade chocolate cake, and I painted in my studio, the converted garage, while they hung out. When they needed something, they asked. When they didn't, I left them alone. After his friends left, Tyler found me in the studio, working on a commission piece for a local restaurant. "Mom, thank you for the perfect birthday," he said. "Thank you for telling me what you actually wanted," I replied. "You know what the best part was?" Tyler asked. It felt real. Like, I didn't have to pretend to be more excited than I actually was. And you didn't have to stress about whether everything was perfect. It was just us. "That's all I've ever really wanted," I said. "Just us being real with each other." Tyler hugged me goodnight a full. Genuine hug, not the obligatory squeeze he'd been giving me for years. "I love you, Mom." Both Sarah and Tyler's mom. "I love you too, kiddo. All of you, exactly as you are." As he headed upstairs, I looked around my studio at the paintings I'd created over the past year. Landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces born from pure emotion. Each one a piece of myself reclaimed, a reminder that I was more than just the sum of my relationships to other people. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "How was the birthday?" I typed back, "Perfect, because it was real." "You sound happy," she replied. I looked around my studio, heard Tyler laughing at something on his phone upstairs, listened to David humming while he loaded the dishwasher. This life we'd built together, not perfect, not without challenges, but authentic and respectful and full of the kind of love that gives people room to breathe. "I am happy," I texted back. Finally, I really am. And for the first time in years, that was completely, entirely true.